Hey everybody, it's your boy Nerdicane coming to you from the new recording studio at the new house. Um, I wanted to get my 2 cents in on this because I found, Oni Press and Lion Forge have kind of had a merger. And it's not big news. It's not a big shift in the comic book company, in the comic book world. Because these are basically, you're you're basically adding nothing to nothing, and you're not getting a whole lot. For those of you who don't know, that Lion Forge has, what do they call it, the Nexus Prime or Catalyst Prime. They've recently made the very bold move of hiring internet screeching banshee Gail Simone as their creative architect or some garbage like that, some ridiculous name. Basically, she's going to be taking over the Catalyst Prime universe, even though there really isn't much of one. Right offhand, any of you listening to this, if you can name 3 original IPs from Catalyst Prime offhand without going to Google, give yourself a no prize. Go out and get yourself, get yourself a Coke Icy or something, because you're pretty good in comics if you know that stuff offhand. But really, when I went to Forbes and I found this article, and I read it, and Forbes is a pretty good normie. For a normie news site, they are pretty good at their nerd news, because they take the politics out of it. They take the virtue signal out of it, and they're just giving facts and interviews from this. And there were things that were said in this one that were really, really interesting and very striking to somebody who knows the comic book industry. So, all right, so let's dive into it. There are some quotes from somebody from a university out west, and it sounds like she is the head of nonsense. I don't know what her the article that I'm showing shows her title, but it sounds like she's the minister of just silliness. But she wrote a book about how comic books became the big movie industry, and it's a phenomenon. It's an anomaly that you really can't count on going forward. Before the MCU, there really weren't the comic book movies were made, but they were never really that big until the MCU. And now that the MCU has sort of done the main part of its run, yes, there's going to be a Phase 4, but I don't think it's going to have the impact, and I don't think it's going to be as big. It's going to be a shadow of itself, especially if they're putting Brie Larson at front and center of this new Marvel MCU going forward, because let's face it, she's incredibly boring on screen. She is not charismatic on screen at all. But it goes on, and it says something about this in the article. It comments about how small the comic book industry is. And I would have to say it doesn't have to be. No industry has to be that small. Well, maybe if you were making, leather saddle seats for horses, that's not that big of well, maybe it is a big industry. I don't know. A lot of horses out there. But the comic books don't have to be this tiny little niche audience. The problem is the comic book industry right now, as we've documented time and time again, the whisper network, the he said, she said, oh, this person's actually, there's no evidence, but this person's a Nazi, so if you work with them, we're not going to work with you. And it's that whisper network that's become the problem in comic books. But comic books, once again, I'm going to say it again, comic books are not, they can be turned into movies, but if you're making a comic book as a pitch for a movie, that's probably not going to work, because that's not what it's supposed to be, and that's not how it's supposed to be used. If you want to pitch something for Hollywood, go to Hollywood and pitch something. Oh, here's where I start to take a little bit of issue with this. And first off, the commenter says that while popular titles sell over 100,000 copies, that is very false. There is maybe 1 or 2 titles each month that sell over 100,000. And I'm not convinced that they sell, because as there's a Batman theory going out there that Batman constantly is consistently up in the near 100,000 or above it. But I think if you went to a lot of comic shops, you would find a lot of copies just sitting on the shelves there. So maybe DC has flooded the market with that one comic book, um, that strategy. And there's also another funny thing that's mentioned in this article, that 2018 was the biggest year in history for comic books. They don't delve into the numbers because that's not what they're trying to do. But when you delve into the numbers, that has been documented very much by that Umbrella guy and Diversity in Comics. That is including the Indiegogo market for comic books. That is including graphic novels. And there was like one other category that they added as well, sort of massaging the numbers upwards. But once again, at least these Indiegogo creators, the independent creators, the true independent creators, at least they're getting on the board, and that's exciting. Because that's part of the process. When they need you, they might hate you, but they need you. When they need you to be included in the numbers so that they can show that it's growing, they do what they didn't ever want to do, is they start to legitimize you. And the weird thing is, in another world, in another time, EVS and all these people who are doing their independent comic books, the big companies, DC, Marvel, Image, things like that, companies like that, would see this success in the Indiegogo market, and then once their project was done, they would be knocking on their door. Marvel would be knocking on the door, and DC would be knocking on the door saying, "Hey, you did great with your property. You can keep that. You can keep doing that. But we want you to come write New Warriors, come write New Night Thrasher, come write this, come do this, come draw and write this." But we're in a very weird industry right now, so we don't get to see that. Another big point I wanted to get to in this article that I picked up, and it's blaringly obvious when you read it if you're paying attention. At no point in this article did they talk about the comic books that were made by either of these companies coming together. They talk about multimedia or cross-media ambitions of their comic books. They don't mention any of the comic books from either of these, Lion Forge or Oni, even once in this article. So this merger isn't about the comic books, and that's the problem. That's why this failure plus failure is going to be equal to failure squared. Because they're not talking about the comic books. The comic books are not key, and they're not essential to the article here. What it is these companies are coming together and they're saying, hey, let's get together and use all of our resources, all of our contacts, and start trying to make things into television shows, into movies, into... Once again, we're going to get a company, whatever they call themselves after this. It's basically going to be a company... Pitch Incorporated. That's what they might as well call themselves, because they are just making pitches for Hollywood. The comic books are going to become ancillary. The comic books are going to be a necessary evil that they feel that they have to do. Okay, fine, we have to do it. To say it's a comic book movie, we have to make a comic book of it. But really, this is a storyboard pitch that we want someone from Hollywood to pick up. But go check it out. It's an interesting article. It's very fair. I mean, they don't talk about comic books very much, but at least they're not out. I'm excited when a media outlet isn't calling somebody in the industry a Nazi or a white supremacist. So that's my humble request from an article. But anyway, tell me what you think of this one. Tell me what you think of the article. I'd bet money that this merger is going to fail, and there's just going to be a slightly bigger company that fails just as hard. But anyway, thanks for listening. You guys go have a good day. My name's Nerdicane. Hit a like, hit a subscribe, and share this with anybody you think might like some of these videos. And tell me what else I should do in the comments. But you guys have a good day. Bye.